Hi guys, it's another edition of the Incredible Hulk podcast. It's nice to be back. This show we're looking at the episode called Broken Image, which was season 3, episode 12, written by Karen Harris and Jill Sherman, who went on to do many stories over the Hulk's run and also became executive producers on the show. It was directed by John McPherson and starred, of course, Bill Bixby as David Banner and Lou Ferrigno as the Incredible Hulk. I'm joined for this episode by Alex. How are you, Alex?
Good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so it's good to have you here. So, Broken Image was, at the time was quite unusual because they later played with it a bit more later on in the seasons, but it was the first time I think that where they had the lead actor play two different roles, i.e. Bill Bixby played Banner and also he played a character called Mike Cassidy in it,
right.
Kind of like a dog shit character, to say the least. We actually open with pretty much with Cassidy's character and his kind of like treatment of a woman that's in love with him, and he kind of spurns her. You know, he's really got no time for her at all. So it sort of shows, like, trying to show the contrast between the two characters as to how this guy is not nice and Banner, of course, is very good. How did you feel about the sort of openings part of it, Alex, and how Bill was, differed?
Well, I mean, obviously, I did see the shows when they first came out. It was a little bit different time and a little bit different with the editing and all that. You could tell that they were trying to do a gangster story with a, monster twist, and that's kind of cute. But I mean, yeah, I always liked the show, and I like the way that they did it, sort of pseudo-serious, sort of like a docudrama, except for a few episodes, like when you had the evil monster Hulk who somehow had gotten the, some sort of serum or some sort of, anti-vaccine from, David Bruce Banner or Bruce David Banner, however you want to say it. But that was definitely like a horror movie.
Oh, yeah.
And they had a horror movie motif going all the way through. So it's a little bit interesting that they decided to use a gangster motif. And it's very funny. And it was very good. And that's one of the reasons why my stepfather actually liked the show better than the A-Team, because
really?
he thought the Incredible Hulk was a little bit more realistic, given the medium. I mean, it wasn't entirely realistic, but was mostly played somewhat realistic.
Yeah, I think for the most part it was played quite straight. And certainly when Bill was, any time Bill Bixby was on the screen, he played it very straight.
Yeah.
And he brought something to it, even in the most unusual scenes or farcical scenes, perhaps. Bill kind of kept the energy up, And
well, of course, I know that it's not exactly the same thing as what we're talking about here, but I do remember an episode where Mr. Fred Rogers, Mr. Humble, Mr. Quiet, Mr. Mild-mannered went to visit the Incredible Hulk set.
Yes.
And made sure to say to both Lou Ferrigno and especially Bill Bixby, you don't really turn green and burst out your clothes and stuff like that,
Yeah, I remember that, seeing that. That was really fun.
Yeah, because, just like the Doctor Who theme, when you're a kid and you see it, it's a little bit scary at first. It's a little bit jarring. And, to see that transformation, even though they reused it and they changed it depending on the, the episode and all that, I'm still scared of that episode I just mentioned with the evil Hulk.
Yeah, that freaked me out. That still freaks me out. There's just something not right about that at all.
Right, yeah, it's incredibly horror movie-like. But getting back to this episode, I mean, it was kind of funny how they did sort of, do nods to the 70s style, the horror movies, the dating movies, the discos, they had another story where a girl unfortunately was getting, either alcohol poisoning or getting high in the disco. And then they had another episode where Mackenzie Phillips was playing a pop star, and he David was given a LSD drug,
That's right. Yeah.
Well,
So they really
yeah.
they've
Well,
tapped
right.
into
Well, still, yeah.
so many different themes, haven't they, in this
Right.
series?
Yeah.
Of
And then they
people
had a
that are
lot of,
kind of
yeah.
victims like Banner. In a way, they've got their own demons to deal with.
Yeah.
And
Well, no, I mean, obviously, that's why they have the lonely man theme, because he's always alone, even if somebody really likes him, he's always alone. And I mean, how can he did have a few, even, sad to say, there was even one episode that seemed very Kung Fu like, like Kung Fu from, David Carradine and all that.
Yeah, yeah.
The Asian guy said, well, we're going to teach you how to meditate to control your anger. It's like, well, that's an awful nice thought, but I don't think you're going to be able to defeat the radiation with your mind. Nice try, but so, and of course, it only worked for a little while, and then he went back to,
Yeah, he tried everything. You've got to give him that. He really wanted to get rid of this creature,
But yeah, like I said, it was very funny. Sort of a, probably a little bit of a nod to, gangster movies, not the recent ones, but the ones from the 70s.
Yes.
And, probably a little bit of the soap opera like, oh, you're not who I think you are, or they're mistaken. At one point he says, lady, you don't know who I am. She goes, you're right, I don't know you, and all that. And of course, it was very funny toward the end when, they buried him. And of course, with a normal person, that would have been the end. But with the Hulk,
that's a different story. Yeah.
Yeah, he just comes, he just bursts out of that hole with the cement and the plastic and says, why you bother me? Just kind of, and I love how the gangsters are like, what is that? They said, that's my stepfather loved that. He loved the reaction sometimes, people going, what the, of course they couldn't say that back then,
Yeah. But I like the scene where, of course, after the, where we've got Bill in the apartment, and McGee knocks on the door, and he opens it, and they come face to face for the first time since the pilot, and and there's like this just this sort of pause. You're looking at one another, and of course McGee says, "Banner, it's you, isn't it?" And then he has to think on his feet and make out that he's Mike Cassidy and throw the guy out, But it was just that lovely moment where they actually meet, because that's quite rare, face to face, and you think, oh my God, how's he going to get around this? And it was quite tense for a moment,
Yeah. No, I mean, that was the other thing that made it interesting to watch, is the sort of, even though it's not exactly the same thing like Wonder Woman, is that you're trying to play it straight. You're trying to play it like it's actually happening, so both of them sort of have to, have seconds to deal with people that are either too mean or too flirtatious or too curious or whatever.
Yeah.
And you'd think that they'd run out of scenarios pretty quickly, or they'd run out of answers pretty quickly, but no, they don't. They actually are able to, stretch it out from, 2 to 5 years. And like I said, I mean, I'll even watch it when it's on, TV or on Hulu or whatever. It's still being played 2 channels in American TV. But I mean, I always liked it because it felt realistic. It did not feel like a cartoony show. Even though I like the 60s Batman, it didn't feel like a cartoony show. And they had a lot of famous stars on it. And the same thing, just like with the Bionic Woman, they tried to play it straight. And then even then they tried to put in, humor. And then you had the guys from MST3K Riff Tracks, making fun of another episode with the evil guy from Karate Kid, the master. And so it's like, and they had, I even saw an episode the other day where they had Pat Morita actually as the cook.
That's right.
Pat Morita, as later played Mr. Miyagi for 7 to 10 years, was actually in an Incredible Hulk episode as the cook.
They had a lot of famous stars back at guest stars. Yeah, they had even like Jeremy Brett, who went on to be very famous as Sherlock Holmes over here in England. He was a British actor. So it's
from
nice that they brought in lots of famous people, or very young actors at the time who went on to do big things. Sometimes,
yeah. Yeah, so I mean, there was a few times like I'll bump into a lot of medical people that'll say, the only thing they didn't like about the TV version of the Hulk was the grand mal seizures, sort of the scenes in the stories where he's, yelling and screaming and shaking and things like that. But I said, well, yeah, they probably did it too much. But then again, if they didn't do it at all, that would have been somewhat unrealistic as well.
true.
But like I said, they always had a funny, sort of a funny in joke of people reacting to the Hulk, or they think that Bruce is dead and gone, and then all of a sudden they see this big green thing coming at him.
Yeah,
So it's always that that ironic post horror, post sci-fi sort of tribute, and it's kind of funny that they ended up being sort of imitated,
yeah.
especially in the 80s, and I didn't, I saw some of the TV movies where they had, the Thor, which was a cute idea. The guy was actually a good actor, and the Daredevil. Didn't like the third movie as much. But yeah, I mean, considering how TV could have been and the budget and all that, it did suffer from the budget, but it was it was usually very thoughtful and creative. And, just like anything else that's actually, sort of artsy, they should have some realistic, some horror, some humor
yeah.
thrown in there. So the kids are fascinated by it, but the adults are kind of going, wink, wink, nudge, nudge,
Yeah.
I get the joke, baby. I know what they mean to say. They can't say it,
But I think they did strike that balance, though, Alex. I think where they
yeah,
did have all those elements in there in most episodes, so it kind of catered for all the age groups, as you said.
yeah. So I mean, that was like I said, it's always good. There's always a reason if a show is classic.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
most of that is in syndication, and it's because it was either done well, or it appeals to a loyal audience, or it was one of the first to do it. And like I said, considering the 70s and how corny it was, and the terrible fashions, and the overdone disco music, and the other substances that were used that we can't talk about here, uh, you know, the Incredible Hulk and Wonder Woman could have been much, much worse. And some episodes were bad in both series, but considering how bad it could have been, or how rushed it could have been, they've stood the test of time, and they've been syndicated for years, so they couldn't have done that bad a job,
No,
budget or not. They did a pretty good job.
I think it's all in the writing, Alex. That's what the stories stand up.
Well, no,
They'll transcend. And the fact,
well, yeah, well, no, but I mean, it's like a piece of music. It's not totally subjective. It is a combination of all the parts and all the elements working together.
yeah,
You believe that this guy, you start to believe that this guy actually did go through a traumatic experience. You do believe that, that he's fighting with himself literally and otherwise.
absolutely.
So, it could have been much, much worse. So yeah, if, I mean, the music in the 70s usually was ghastly and very, fart sounding, and tons of sad trombone, effects and all that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, considering that they get, Ted Cassidy to do the narration, and it almost sounds like a documentary. And then
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
the scene from the pilot, Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry. And it's just,
Yeah.
I love it how my stepfather almost always laughed when he saw that. He said, that was so well done,
And that's been quoted so many times now, hasn't it?
Yeah.
That line, that's
Yeah.
that's
Well,
just
no, but but the thing is, it's the way he did it. He did it right. You know
yes.
what I mean? You show it to people and they go, oh, they just,
And you believe him. You believe him. Yeah.
yeah, it just,
Totally.
it's an element of the writing, the acting, the pace, the music. It's just like a movie in a way.
Yeah.
The elements have to, blend together, because if they don't, it's not going to stay on TV for long.
The whole thing will fall apart. That's right.
Yeah.
And they seem to get it. But their strike rate pretty much was good.
Yeah,
there might have
no,
been a few
it was
episodes that were
very, yeah, it was very consistent, because the other thing too is I can actually use my stepfather as a guide. And if he really doesn't like something, or if he really thinks it's completely stupid, he'll let you know soon, and he'll let you know why. And he hasn't been wrong on the whole. I mean, that's part of the reason probably too why they changed the style. And in the 80s, it got, almost all the TV shows got a little bit more fantastic in terms of the characters weren't, believable, or they were very rich all of a sudden.
Yeah.
I think they were trying to imitate the style now of, in the 80s of Dynasty and all that. But
Yeah.
But
Don't forget, guys, as well, I just want to mention quickly, don't forget at the end of our discussion, do stick around, because we've got our first guest interview with one of the actors who was in Broken Image, Jed Mills, who played Teddy. So do stick around for that. It was very kind. He gave me a lot of time, and I spoke to him. So I hope you enjoyed that interview at the end of the show.
Yeah, no, I understand he was in a lot of 70s TV shows, Barney Miller and other things, but he was in
Lou Grant and things like that. And a lot of those sort of big shows at the time, that were around. Yeah, he did a lot of those. And most actors, come from like mainly stage background before they break into television, don't they? So they get a lot of experience, from that.
Right. Well, obviously, depending on who you ask and depending on what era, I mean, acting is like singing. You have to talk a certain way and walk a certain way, and the stage and dealing with a live audience, and the fact that you can't always yell cut. And back then you didn't have 10,000 computers to blur everything in, and
yes,
special effects and all that. Yes, there was always editing, so it's not completely realistic, but on a stage it has to be.
Absolutely. You can't hide on the stage, you can't do another take or anything like that,
Right. So, So obviously, with a movie, they can put in more effects and they can put in more editing. And depending on what type of movie it is and what director it is, it can be very tight or very loose. In terms of television, you have to have, because I remember too that the other thing, Frank, that you may want to mention is the fact that the shows were very different back then. And there was only 3 or 4 networks, maybe some independents depending on your area. And they may have shown British shows, or they may have shown religious shows, or a combination of all 3, as well as, B movies or grade Z movies where it's kind of corny. And also the fact that you had a lot of commercial breaks, and also you're watching it not on the beautiful computer screen, internet, digital, smart TV that you have today with, if it works correctly, it's brilliant colors and it's nice and clear and really good to look at. You're talking about the 70s where some people were still using black and white TV.
That's right. So, I had one of those when I was watching the Hulk. Yeah,
right.
So I didn't know he was green for quite a while.
Right, and you also had to deal with the local stations breaking in with news or blizzards or whatever. So, and also it could be preempted by local events, by national events. So it's not like it is now where they might put a message saying, watch it again at 12:30 or what. And that's why you had to have VCRs, because sometimes you couldn't be home.
Yeah.
And in the 70s, those machines were $2,000 to $8,000, never mind the cassettes.
I know, amazing.
So, I mean, they might have repeated it, but that was in America. That wasn't in, England and other places. So, so sometimes even in the 90s, I was watching TV shows with Eliza Dushku, who is from Massachusetts, which is where I'm from. And she also knows Lou Ferrigno, and she also did the voice for She-Hulk in the cartoons.
Oh.
And she's going to a lot of conventions, as well as, going to school in Massachusetts, because she was born here. And even with her shows in the 90s, they got preempted. or if the station made a mistake and they stopped running the visual and you only had the audio, or you had, 10 minutes of black screen, even in the 90s, never mind 1978.
Yeah.
So people forget that even though it's nice to watch it on the internet, and it's usually unlimited depending on the state, and you don't have as many annoying commercials.
That's true. Yeah.
Most digital companies now, make it so that you have usually a very smooth, very pretty picture. And in the 70s, you were lucky if you got TV. You were lucky if you could, watch it without it fading out, or the TV gets too hot, or
Yeah, that's right.
the
Yeah.
tube burns out and you have to buy another one, or you have to watch it with elongated faces. And, and then, like I said, it gets interrupted and it gets, changed around, and they go, oh, this show won't be seen tonight, and too bad. And, you're out of luck.
But I'd say this episode I really enjoyed. I for the fact really that we saw Bill stretching his acting muscles a bit more,
Right.
Playing two very different roles, which was really fascinating to watch. And I think he pulled it off really well. And when when you had the brief moment where they both met, even then you could see the subtleties, the differences between the two of them really, really well. I think you could definitely tell this was a different guy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that was the other trick, as I've mentioned before, that they had, two Wonder Womans on screen in one episode, two Sammy Davises, two, Bill Big, and even I remember even asking my stepfather, back then, can they do that, or is that a camera trick and they've, superimposed it, or they've re-edited it? Now they could just do it. They could do 1,000 with a computer. It's no fun.
Yeah, and it doesn't take any time, but that setup would have probably taken quite a while to do at the time.
Right, exactly. So I mean, yeah,
one there, and
yeah. So no, I mean, I saw him in a lot of shows, and my parents have always, seen him, and I even saw The Courtship of Eddie's Father, where he plays a father figure, but it's not it's a more relaxed show than The Incredible Hulk.
Oh yeah, gentle show, I think. Yeah.
So I mean, you always knew he had a very calm demeanor. Usually, he was very mild mannered, but he was still masculine. And those were the days, again, where not everybody had to be a bodybuilder, not everybody had to be tall, even though you could tell he was tall.
Yeah.
And like I said, I remember, they've done infomercials and commercials now with Lou Ferrigno playing the Hulk for 10 seconds for a cell phone company or something like that. But like I said, if anybody wants to go on YouTube and see the Mr. Rogers, meeting Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno, to illustrate to kids that some, of course, things that you see on TV are re-edited and they're not real.
It sort of blows that out of the. But anyway, we're going to wrap it up now. Anyway, Alex, and as I get to say, guys, stick around for the Jed Mills interview after this. I hope you enjoy it. Yeah. And Alex, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. So thank you so much. And for a bit of insight into television back then and how it is now. That's been fascinating.
All right.
Jed Mills, welcome to the Incredible Hulk podcast. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, and thank you for asking me.
Jed, now I just want to focus briefly on some of your early career. I believe you were born in Brooklyn, New York, weren't you?
Correct.
Yeah, and Brooklyn back then, Jed, what was it like? Sort of growing up and working in that kind of that city back then, compared to what it might be now,
Oh, it's been gentrified. It's a totally different place, really. Brooklyn, New York. When I was growing up, and I grew up in the projects near the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and we were rather poor. And I'd always wanted to be I used to watch TV a lot. The movies was my thing, and one of my favorite things to watch is any movie with John Mills, who's an English actor that I'm sure you know who that was.
Oh yeah, very much so.
One of the reasons I love love John Mills so much was because my real birth name is John Mills. And actually I had to change my name to Jed because I couldn't join Screen Actors Guild with the same name as John Mills. So that always gave me that fantasy whenever I would see that my name up on the screen, that it was me and not the actual English actor. That's what got me started. Growing up in Brooklyn in the projects was interesting. And as opposed to what someone might have an image of that it was very much community, and it was very much Americans. We had Latinos, we had Chinese, white, Jewish, Italians, but we had the whole melting pot. And because of that, I attribute that to being open and loving all different cultures and not being where a lot of white Americans are bigots. Well, maybe not all, more like a third of the country. So that was great. And I went to school there, obviously. I went to Catholic school, which I hated with a passion. And then I finally moved to another neighborhood where I was on a gang for a while, which we weren't really bad guys. We were like a club. But I still always had that dream of being an actor. So after, at 18 years old, I joined the military. I got out of the military, spent 2.5 years in Germany, came home, and I started going to acting school. And I really didn't like what they were doing much. It was method acting. I wasn't really a fan of the method acting, but I was doing it anyhow for about 1.5 years. And every time they asked me to do an improvisation, I couldn't do it. I couldn't walk and say a word at the same time. It was just really awful. Then one day I was at the Lenox, Massachusetts Art and Music Fair, and I was sitting on the grass with my girlfriend, and Peter Boyle, you know who Peter Boyle was? He just passed away about 2 years ago.
Yes, I know that. I know that. Yeah.
American actor who did a lot of work. He was on a series called whatever. Anyhow, I had just seen him in a movie the day before. He sits down, and he's walking towards us. He sits down next to us, and he invited us over to see an improv company audience participation show. So I said, oh yeah, I'll go watch it, sure. I ain't gonna do anything, but I'll go watch it. So we get into the tent, and Janet Coleman, the director, the first person she calls on to participate in audience participation, improvisation, and I'm saying this kind of quickly because I know we don't have a lot of time. She picks on me to do something. Well, however she described it and explained it, I was able to do it. And she called on me about 7 times. And I was already in acting school, by the way. And every time she called on me, I was able to do what she asked me to do. And after the show, I'm standing outside, and Peter Boyle and Alan Alda, Janet Coleman, David Steinberg, all these really well-known people come up to me and they said, "We thought you were really terrific. We'd like to invite you to join our improv company."
Yeah. So it kind of happens like that, doesn't it? Yeah.
It was amazing. So from that moment on, I became an improvisationalist, and that's how I learned how to act. Improvisation, which is the best tool for actors, in my opinion. Sandy Meisner, who was one of the famous improv acting teachers, that was his method of teaching. Gene Hackman went with him, and he in that particular method of learning how to act teaches you how to listen, to be in the moment, to focus, and all that sort of thing, and be prepared. So, and then I'm in an improv company that was one of the most the best of the 5 improv companies on the planet back in the early 70s, called War Babies. And we're in New York, and we get all kinds of great reviews, and people come to see us over and over again. Clark came to see us, and he brought us all to L.A. to do a series with Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello. I hadn't made any movies before then. I hadn't really done any TV before that. So we all go there. I mean, I just done stage work. So we go to come to Los Angeles, and the show is a episodic comedy musical thing where Frankie sings and we do comedy. I was by then a comedy actor, doing a lot of comedy, hoping to do some drama at some point in my life.
Yeah.
But at that point, I was doing comedy. They gave me the role as the on-camera announcer. The caveat was that I would turn into a werewolf when I was announcing the show, and that was the running gag throughout the series. And I also did other comedy bits during the show. It was a fun show.
Yeah.
That started me in Los Angeles, and I would get a bunch of smaller parts on the Beretta and shows of that day. I did Night Court and Amazing Stories and Too Close for Comfort and Lou Grant. I did 3 Lou Grants. I did a lot of smaller roles, and then my first guest starring role was when I got auditioned for The Incredible Hulk for the part of Teddy.
Ah.
And that was the first time I got a guest starring role. Okay, those were featured roles. You work a day, 2 days, you have a bunch of lines, but it wasn't the foremost guest starring characters. Okay. So, and what I did was basically I imitated a person that I knew from my childhood who was trying to talk like that. He's always talking like that. He's from Brooklyn, and he had this here kind of accent. And I said, this is a good person to do. So I went there with this white suit that I had. That was a real funky suit from Western Costume, a plaid shirt, and this gray tie with a burro, a Mexican tie. And I did the audition. I got home, and 20 minutes later, and they booked me. And they even wanted me to wear the white suit, the shirt, and the tie that I did it. It was so wonderful that this came about in that way. Bill Bixby, when I got on the set with Bill, I just met him on, get to the first day of shooting, and we were running through a scene. As soon as I started talking, he couldn't stop laughing. He thought it was the funniest thing. And I said, okay, let's go. Come on, let's get serious. And we do it again, and he laughed some more. So we had a wonderful meeting, and Bill and I became very friendly in terms of our working together as fellow actors.
Now, Broken Image, Jed, it had it was interesting, a story. It was a good story, but also from the fact that Bill was playing 2 different roles in it.
Correct.
And how did you find that? The switch that he did, because sometimes you had to work with his Banner character, and other times you had to work with his Mike Cassidy character.
Well, yeah, because I was a go-between between the 2 guys.
Yes,
as you recall, and it was very easy. Bill, as Cassidy, was very convincing, and there was no conflict in terms of me thinking it was David Banner. When I was working with, and also I'm an improviser. When you're doing improvisation on such a intense level that I was doing it, you jump from one thing to another all the time, and you make a total commitment to whatever you're doing. So when I was working with Bill as David Banner, who I didn't know in the show, I just met him in that building. It was a natural relationship based on not knowing each other. But when I worked with Cassidy, what was his first name again?
Mike.
Mikey, of course. Hey, Mikey.
Hey, Mikey, yeah.
Hey, Mikey, how you doing, Mikey? When I worked with him, he's a very strong character. He's really serious, and he's really intense. He looks you right in the eye, and of course, I had this wonderful time doing Teddy. I just loved doing this character. I mean, it was almost like a character I was born to do, and I still say to today, if I had kept doing that character for every audition I went to, I'd probably be like, a well-known person, because that's the kind of character that people get to know and love after a long time. But I didn't. I went on to do different characters for every show. But with Bill working with me as 2 different people, he also gave me a lot with each character to be able to have that relationship differ from the other relationship. So it was it was an easy transition and a very much interesting and fun transition and experience.
Can you talk?
Did I answer your question at all?
Oh yeah, you did, Jade. I just want to ask you something because I'm really fascinated about how that show in particular operated around that time. Back then, not so much now, but back then, I'm assuming it's the same with the Hulk. I know in British television back in the day, they used to have a week or two of rehearsals before they shot an episode. Did you have that kind? Did you work in the same kind of way on the Hulk?
You showed up and did the scenes.
Ah, right.
You learned your lessons the night before. Not your lessons, but your lines, your dialogue.
Yeah.
You learned that. You got to the set and you already had that down, and you worked on it at night. Because when you shot an hour episode, I think it was 7 days of all together with shooting. So you get the script, and you get the script in advance. I got it a couple of days in advance. So I went over it and I learned it and I learned it and I learned it in terms of memorizing it, knowing it, studying it. And you get on the set and we do it what they do basically, the rehearsal basically is a blocking rehearsal.
Yes.
It's not an acting rehearsal. So they say, okay, let's block scene one, take one. And the director, who was John McPherson on that show, who was a wonderful man, and I loved what he did, and the lighting on that show, and I think the photography was, for the time, was brilliant. He basically did the blocking and didn't give you any acting or any. He said, I want you. He didn't say things like, okay, so you've never met this guy, so you got but you can run into him and you're surprised. He never did anything like that. I knew the lines, I knew the scene, and then I learned the blocking and we shot it. That's how it worked.
Yeah.
Simple. It was simple.
So all the sort of the lighting would be done, but would all be sort of set up while you did a scene or before the scene, or.
Well, the lighting is now. Here's the other thing about it. Now, Bill and I are working. We're running our lines. We're running it while they're setting up the set, because they're building the set as you're there sometimes, and they're creating the lighting or constructing the lighting while you're there. You get there. I mean, they're there at like 5 in the morning, and you get there at 6 or 7 in the morning, and then you're going to do blocking and stuff. But they never finish with the lighting. And when you get there, they're still doing that, and the lighting director is tweaking this and tweaking that, and McPherson is saying, well, how about if we do this, talking to the lighting people and the sound people. Well, the sound people are basically, that's pretty standard in terms of how they do that. They just put a mic on you and then they record you. But the lighting, they say, and we have a stand-in, so they have to stand in there while they're doing the lighting to get the light, somebody your size and your complexion, getting the correct lighting for what they think is appropriate, and then when that's all done, they say, okay, let's do it. Then we get in our places, and we say, okay, action, and we do the scene. And then we do the scene, and we'll usually do a master first, and then we'll do body shots, like what do you call it, mid shot, and then we'll do close-ups from both angles. So it's every TV show or movie I've done basically is done that way. You do the master, then you do a mid shot, half shot. It's, in other words, it's like, it's not a close-up of the face, it's just like from the waist up.
Yes, yeah, mid-shot, I think, yeah,
mid-shot, yeah. And then you do a close-up, and it's from each actor's point of view. And that's it. And then with that particular show, we did 1 or 2 takes, unless there was a glitch somewhere, and in the sound or something. They were hearing a plane go overhead or something like that.
Yeah.
But basically, it was like bang, 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 bang. Okay, let's move on to the next scene. They were professional. It each show I found out at the time was $500,000 to produce each episode.
Ah, was that a lot of money back then, Jed, or was that sort of reasonably normal?
That was a lot of money.
That was a lot of money. Yeah.
I had no idea. I asked the showrunner at the time. I can't remember his name, but I could picture him clearly.
You talking about Kenneth Johnson?
No, he was one of the producers.
I'm sorry.
One of the writers.
Oh, I see.
Not the show. What's the AD? The AD, the first AD, second AD. Then there's the production manager. I can't remember the title. But this guy, he was in charge of making sure everything comes together. Okay, I can't remember the title as we speak. And we became friendly, and he was very close with Bill Bixby. They were friends, very good friends, and they would hang out together.
Yeah.
I asked him once, I said, what does it cost to shoot a movie? I figured he was going to say maybe $50,000. To me, that was a lot of money. He said it's $500,000 per episode.
Oh, way. That's a lot of, when you put it into perspective, Jed, when you consider how many episodes they did per season, that's an awful lot of money.
Yeah. By the way, the other Karen Carlson was a doll to work with. The guy, I can't remember his name, the bad guy, the blonde-haired guy that was the leader of the bad guys.
Yeah, his name escapes me at the moment, but I remember him. His face.
Very nice. Everybody, and a couple of friends of mine just got jobs in the show, and I think they were like a day player. They were playing cards. They were the two of the henchmen of the bad guy, and they were playing cards. Remember that scene?
I do. Yeah. I do. Yeah.
Chris Wallace and the other guy's name escaped me. But there are two friends of mine that showed up on the set when I'm working. Which was really interesting to have a couple of friends of mine seeing me doing a guest starring role.
Yeah.
It was a little ego boosting.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Anyway, for now, Jed, I want to thank you for talking about Broken Image. I do appreciate your time for that. And
my pleasure.
And we're good luck with everything that you're doing at the moment. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you. And thanks, guys, for listening. Take care.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.